Oh, well, hello. I didn't see you there. I was just taking a few minutes to peruse this old book here, a little bit of fancy book learning. I like to come out here in the mornings and sit on the steps of my porch and just sort of ponder things. I'm a simple man, but I admit I spent a few years of college and doing my book learning. And when it comes down to all this rhetoric and rhetoric and study popular culture. It might seem intimidating sometimes, but I reckon it's just a bunch of $5 words. And don't be afraid of that now, because I find sometimes a $5 word in your life can be worth 100. I think about my daddy, God rest his soul. I think about my daddy, and he never got as far in the school as I did, but he always said, son, son, you go to school now and you make something of yourself. Well, I suppose learn to study rhetoric. That's me. That's me making something of myself. Now, for those of you who are wondering just what the hell that was you just saw, stay with me. There's a plan. All right. So that old time oratory. So hopefully you've seen the lectures already that talked about classical rhetoric. And I want to move just a little bit further in time from 3 to 400 BCE to just into that the AD. Right, this is where we are in the first century of the contemporary era. That's what I'm talking about now, because there we see sort of further concretized. We see this, or solidified the study of rhetoric and oratory that we're going to get in Western culture for about 2,000 years around there. And I want to then show you how that moves into Neo-Aristotelianism. Don't worry, I'm not going to cover all 2,000 years. So this discussion we're going to begin with is talking about Quintilian. We often call him Quintilian. He's Roman. Marcus Fabius Quintilianus. A great word. I should have told Ivy. Let's call him Marcus Fabius when he had Grant, right? Quintilian is best known for his quote, he actually says the good man speaking well, but I offer here the good person speaking well. That was his goal, that was his objective, was to to teach people to be effective and good speakers, and the belief that this was an important part of your personal development, your moral development. That as you taught somebody about how to be a good speaker, an ethical speaker, communicator, you taught them how to be a good and ethical person. I would like to think, as we learn to become ethical communicators, and part of the ethical communicator is being aware of the messages we consume, I would like to think that even still today, yes, that does help us become more ethical people. I like to think so, that we become aware of things. We don't just accept things so casually, we're more critical of them. It helps us to be better people. I like to think so. But that's one of his claims to fame. And he wrote like a whole set, like a 12-volume set on the study of rhetoric. The Institutio Oratoria is what he wrote. I've not read them, thank you. But the goal was teach them to be great speakers, right? That's what he did. He wanted people to be great speakers. That was his goal. And so think about today, you had to take an oral communication general education class, whether it was fundamentals or public speaking or argumentation debate, right? Any of those, right? We thought it was important to teach you how to be a good speaker. Maybe not a great speaker, that's okay, but to be a good speaker. But that was the goal, was to teach people how to become great speakers. How do you do that? You study the greats. That's what you do. It's sort of like if you think about taking a class to learn about filmmaking, you may well watch the great examples of film. Right, so you watch whoever you want to call the great examples, the great filmmakers, whoever they are. That's what you watch, and you study them, the great examples, to learn how you would also become a great filmmaker. So he lays out, by the way, so Quintilian lays out the study of what is great speaking, and this leads to, I want to clarify that leads to the tradition we get for centuries in the West of teaching people to become good speakers, and really especially uh, a Renaissance forward. So, and I'm just going to pick a number here, 1600s and on. Becoming a great speaker was really finding the great speeches of history and studying them, that you would be influenced to become a great speaker. Right. So this was not Quintilian, teaching the greats so much, but it was that method of thinking, and also what counts as being great, that was affected in part by Quintilian. So yes, what you did use to become a good speaker. This is the old way of teaching oratory and speech into the 20th century. I want to say into the 20th century, when you studied rhetoric and oratory. By the way, President John Quincy Adams, this is early 19th century, he actually had taught rhetoric at Harvard. Oh, so that's still something for you. Yeah, but you studied the greats to learn how to be great at speaking. Right? And so this is where Aristotle comes in. Aristotle, coming after Quintilian, what I mean is the importance of Aristotle. So part of what has made Aristotle so central to the study of rhetoric here as we're now in the 21st century is that as we're studying the greats, who are the great speakers and why are they great, often we look back at Quintilian, but also very much Aristotle, and using the standards of Aristotle. He didn't establish them, but he clarified what goes in those categories. He did that, and we looked at Aristotle for how do we evaluate a speaker, and we use that then to evaluate the speakers that we then study to become great. I'm just trying to give you a general picture here of how these things relate. I hope this is clear. So, we're talking about in chapter 2, Neo-Aristotelian. This is here just Aristotelian, right? It's of Aristotle. So Aristotle in the Rhetoric, he talks about the 5 canons. And again, the 5 canons predate Aristotle, but he really takes the time to lay out those 5 canons, to delve into them and really explore them in the Rhetoric, which I mentioned in the lecture on classical rhetoric. So in Aristotelian rhetoric, we have this category known as invention. When we're looking at a speech, evaluating a speaker, we study their invention. So invention has to do with logos, right? Logos is logic, appeals to logic. You probably learned about this at some point, right? That all good speeches, they appeal to logic in some way. To pathos, which appeals to emotion. You see that P-A-T-H is in the roots of like words like empathy and sympathy, which is about feeling sorry for somebody or feeling sorry with them. But also you say, oh, that is pathetic. Okay, that's why we use the word pathetic sometimes. But a pathetic appeal is one that pulls at your heartstrings. You say, oh, those children were so pathetic, I just had to help them. And hopefully you learned that any good speech has a logical appeal to it, but also it's got heart. It's got heart. And then also there's ethos or ethos, right? Ethos is about the credibility of the person. You see that ETH might think of ethics, and ethos, the credibility of the person, right? And I was asked one time, I was in anyway, sort of a contentious situation. I just let the thing go. I should really challenge the person. They said, didn't Aristotle say, above all, logic is the most important of these? Not really. So Aristotle says that logic is more valuable than emotion. We need to have emotional elements because we are emotional people and we need to appeal to that, but it can't just be emotion. You have to rely primarily on logic. But he says, without ethos, without some credibility, you've got nothing. Or he says, you've got nothing. And ethos is established in a few different ways. We sometimes think of ethos as just, I have good evidence. Well, it makes you credible, suppose, but Aristotle says there are three ways that you establish your ethos. One of those is by demonstrating virtue, being a virtuous person, a person that people can trust, a person who seems to be of good character. You're not believed to be untrustworthy, a villain, a thief, etc. So being trustworthy. That you demonstrate goodwill, that your goal is helping others, that you're not just trying to help yourself. Your goal is to help others. Think about politicians. When they speak, they don't say, elect me that I'll have great power. They say, elect me that I can do things for you, right? They're trying to demonstrate their goodwill. And ethos also comes through in, and I don't know why, it's one of the few Greek words I happen to remember from reading the rhetoric. I read it, the English translation, with lots of like Greek embedded in there. Phronesis, which is practical wisdom. Practical wisdom is that thing where what a person says, it just sounds like it's a reasonable, smart thing. You know, it's that practical wisdom that it makes sense, it seems logical, it seems orderly, or not orderly, but it seems likely, right? So we call it that practical wisdom. It doesn't seem like a silly connection of ideas, but it seems like the sort of thing that would make sense, right? So that's what he says. There's logos, there's pathos, and there's ethos. And again, ethos aren't really so much arguments that you make, but they are what you develop and portray and present of yourself and how you're perceived. So that's invention. Shoo! Right? And then we get arrangement. And arrangement sort of tells you, right? It's the order of things, right? Do I start by telling you the sad story and drawing you in and telling you how common that sad story is? Do I tell you how common something occurs and then tell you the sad story that demonstrates it? What order do I go through? So arrangements also things like, do I first talk about celebrating our cultural values before I get you to do this thing? Or, you know, what is the order of the ideas that I have? How is that effective? Right? So, or how is it that that speaker did it in a way that was effective? That's arrangement. So these, by the way, these are the canons. I haven't stated that already, right? So invention is the first canon. Arrangement is the second canon. The third canon is style, right? So style is word choice, and people sometimes confuse style with delivery. Style is word choice. So go back to that strange interlude that I opened this lecture with. Me sitting there on the steps of that front porch. Okay, that's not actually style yet, right? The style was not the delivery of my words. Style was the words I chose to use. I talked about book learning, $5 words, my daddy, those sorts of, as opposed to my father, right? Style refers to word choice and how the word choice, in a good way, creates the style. Is the style meant to be, as that may have been, right? It was exaggeration, a little bit of hyperbole, but is it meant to be folksy? Is it casual? It is a high style, right? Very, right? Therefore, let us sally forth in the great hope, right? That's and take delivery out of it. Think about the words. So style is very much about the words and how the words indicate to us whether the style is high or, I don't want to say low, but is more common or casual. So style, right? So style, that's what I'm talking about with style. It has to do with the word choice. And so if you think about style and you were to, if you've seen any of the speaking, for instance, of, you know, Donald Trump, uh, his style, he has a tendency to, his style, to have these like asides that he's speaking. He'll say things have been good. I mean, really, some people have said sort of even sort of great, right? That style has to do with the way that there is these casual insertion of these side remarks and words. That would be part of the style, the words that are spoken, right? The words that are spoken. The delivery, well, that's the fact that I spoke a little more on the side of my mouth and I spoke it a certain way and added an affected drawl, right? That's delivery. So I want you to understand the difference between style and delivery. Style has to do with the word choice and how that affects the type of message you have. Delivery is how those are said. Softly, loudly, but also are they said with great intense emotion? Are they said more subtly? Right? So it's the delivery of that message. I put an asterisk there. So when we study the delivery of artifacts or of text, sometimes that's difficult because we don't have any audio or visual recording of it. And so at best we rely upon comments made, It was delivered with great energy and enthusiasm, and there was not a dry eye in the house, right? Sometimes you get that. Sometimes you don't even get that, right? Sometimes you just don't get anything on delivery. So I put an asterisk there saying that as we do this sort of Aristotelian approach, we can talk about invention, right? The canon of invention, and it's the canon of invention, the other parts of the canon, the canon of arrangement, the canon of style, the canon of delivery. Sometimes it's relying upon what others have said about it. So that's the canon of delivery. And then you get the canon of memory. I put 2 asterisks because I didn't feel like putting 28. I'm going to tell you right now, I disagree with the author. I haven't really liked this author. I think it's a very good author. It's a good textbook. But I disagree with the author of our book on discussion of memory. And she does clarify that memory is a different thing now than it used to be. But I disagree with her. And I'm not alone in this. I don't mean that like she's the lone voice. I'm just saying I'm not in the same camp as her in terms of what memory is. So first, in the great classic tradition, memory was very important. These were contests. Could you speak? Could you give a 90-minute speech that you had memorized, without making a mistake? That actually was a thing. Remember, we have Socrates who didn't believe in ever writing anything down. So the emphasis upon memory is still a big thing. And so if I ask you about, memory on the exam and you say something about mnemonic devices, I'm not going to give you credit. Just do that. I'm telling you that right now, and I'm being dead serious. Okay, but memory does still mean a lot to us because today we put a certain sort of value upon people just speaking from their heart, right? And even when we know they have speech writers, we like the feeling that they're just speaking to us. They're just speaking to us as though it were a conversation, not a carefully planned memorized speech, but a conversation, right? Thus, the teleprompters that sometimes actually are in front of the camera, right? So you can look right to the camera and talk to you as they are reading the words, right? Otherwise, sometimes when they're, speeches not just to a camera, but to an audience, there's those shields there, and there's teleprompters putting the words up on them, right? Yeah, but the idea is that, and it does, of course, improve their delivery, but just the feeling that people are connecting with us. There was a moment at the 2016 Republican National Convention when a Navy SEAL was speaking, and as he was speaking, he got tripped up on his words. He said, "Sorry, I'm just not very good at this speaking. I just want to just talk to you straight." And people clapped because he tripped on the words, wasn't going to read from this teleprompter anymore, was just going to talk to us. And because you could see the teleprompter, I mean, those words about, "Sorry, I'm not good at reading, I'm just going to talk straight to you," that was not on the teleprompter, but everything he said after that was actually on the teleprompter. But people sort of, love this idea of, yeah, don't read to us, just talk to us. So memory is still important because we value what we feel like are spontaneous remarks as their conversation. We feel like they're more true and sincere, that something's been written and planned. That's a general reaction that people have a tendency to have to speeches. So memories become something different, about suggesting to us, asking us to forget, suspend, willing suspension of disbelief sort of thing, that you've written and prepared this. Instead, you're just speaking to us, right? That's often what the category of memory has really become. Again, also really not something we can study as we're doing, looking at old artifacts. We really can't do that anymore. So yeah, so those are Aristotle's 5 canons, and you've got to know them. Yeah, the 5 canons.